Okay, this video is going to be serious, unlike the previous two that I put out about the Tesla Model Pi. If any of you saw that, I hope you found that funny. This one is a tad bit more serious, still based around not Tesla, but Elon Musk. And this tweet actually inspired me to go ahead and do those previous two videos, even though I've been thinking about it for quite a while. So this is what inspired me. Lisa Wheeler wrote, "If Apple and Google boot Twitter from their app stores, Elon Musk should produce his own smartphone." Okay. Half the country would happily ditch the biased, snooping iPhone and Android. There's a lot to take in there. The man builds rockets to Mars. A silly little smartphone should be easy, right? So little do you know. Now, Elon responded, "I certainly hope it does not come to that, but yes, if there is no other choice, I will make an alternative phone." Now, obviously, I had to respond. So, is the Tesla phone I've read about for a year just fiction? I was thinking it might be a Starlink device. The Starlink device makes sense. That made sense. To make a device unexpectedly because of the Twitter app being removed from the store doesn't make sense. So, now that I've read that, let me set that tweet up with Lisa Wheeler was basically responding to a tweet by Elon that Apple was considering removing the Twitter app from the App Store. So that's where this all comes from. And of course, Google could do it too. I don't know if Google has contacted them. And of course, this all has to do with content moderation. Lots of things wrapped up in this whole mess that Elon has turned Twitter into. But let's set that aside and let's just focus on this tweet. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, the whole thought that making a new phone, a new mobile device should be easy, little do you know. So many people, so many makers of devices that this was what they do have failed in the marketplace. Now, their failures aren't due to poor products. I really liked HTC's stuff. HTC was the first to do Android. They were the first to jump on board and make Android device. And of course, their previous history with Microsoft and Windows Mobile kind of set them up to be a key player. Look at Nokia. They owned the market. They dominated the market. I mean, dominated it like no other maker has since. What are they doing? Nothing. Their name is used by another OEM, but Nokia's not in the space any longer, really. HTC's not in the space. Motorola got tossed around, and they're currently under Lenovo, one of the Chinese makers. LG, very good competitor of Samsung out of Korea. What are they doing right now? You know, it's if you look at this space, and then let's look to China. If anybody could make a device that could potentially dominate, it would come out of China. Huawei. What happened to them? You know, it just took one sanction on 5G by the U.S. to really kill their competitiveness in this space. And, I've had Huawei devices. I really like them. I think they are spectacular devices. Hang on. So I liked my Huawei. I thought it was a better performer than the Samsung equivalent Samsung of the time. Seemed to be more efficient, I would say. The hardware itself, while good, could have been a little nicer, but still, overall, very, very worthy competitors. And a friend in Hong Kong actually had suggested that I look at them. So, nope, they couldn't do it. Microsoft. Microsoft has been in the space since the late 90s, early 2000s. Got into the space first by providing the OS, and then really getting behind having HTC to build the devices and putting the OS on it, and then moving over to Nokia and having them make devices, then ultimately buying the Lumia product. Then, of course, now with the Surface Duo and Surface Duo 2, they had a bit of market share back in that Windows Phone time frame, but they couldn't maintain it. Now, what has killed all of these competitors or made them insignificant? Well, two things. One, Apple has a firm grip on the US market, which is a huge market. It's like everybody has devices and multiple devices here. So Apple has a pretty tight strangle, actually, on the market, and their walled garden kind of helps hold that in place. And when you look over to Android, Android is really Samsung if you get right down to it. Samsung is what makes Android roll. Yes, Google is providing some devices, but without Samsung, that market, Google would never see more than a few percent market share. And if Samsung were to ever ditch Android, well, that would be the potentially the end of Android. At least that's one of my thoughts and opinions. So if we really look at this and we see that Microsoft is just trying to come up with something complementary to the Surface product line, I do believe that Microsoft's move in this market is a long-term move, with the understanding that there needs to be devices that are part of their other services, and thus why they have not totally given up on this space, and why they've given it over to the Surface Group instead of leaving it under those who handled the Windows Phone and then the takeover of Lumia. So none of these players have been able to succeed. It's dominated truthfully by two people, the market is Apple and Samsung. So why would we think that anything that a new player could do could steal half the market share in the US? That just makes no sense. I can't see that happening. Apple users are not going to dump their devices just so they can maintain a Twitter app. And that's what would be happening. Are they going to be able to do all the other things that they've been doing? No, they're going to lose out on iMessage, first of all. So that's going to be a huge blow. And that might be the number one barrier today is iMessage. Because we don't talk anymore, or we talk very rarely, we message. And Apple's really laid in on that iMessage thing. Is it the best messaging platform? I don't know. That's debatable. But it doesn't matter. It's proprietary to Apple. So Apple users communicating to Apple users. And if you fall out of that ecosystem, so you go over to an Android, well, now you kind of become an outcast in message groups, etc., because you're the guy that's sending, or gal that is sending messages that you can't. Well, you can now, like, I don't know what it looks like on the iPhone side, but at least we can. We now on the Android side do not get bombarded with so and so liked this message, or all all of that. The likes now get thumbs up and all now get attached to the messages. I don't know what happens on the other end. Hopefully it does the same thing, but I doubt it. And hopefully they are seeing some of what we used to see. But that makes you an outcast in some circles. Do Apple users want that to happen? No, 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 no. And there's other apps they just will not be able to do, games, etc. Now, some of that stuff's available on Android. However, first of all, sticking to the context of the post, she said Apple and Android. So really, she made several mistakes there. She called an operating system a company by stating Android, and she stated an operating or a company as an operating system potentially using Apple. But in the context of what she was saying concerning snooping, etc., it's not Android that does the snooping, it's Google that does that. Of course, Apple and Google have access to your data. The incentives were higher for Google because Google really didn't sell anything but information. But if you really think that if Elon Musk built a device, the same stuff wouldn't happen, you're kidding yourself. So stop kidding yourselves. That's not a reason to jump ship. It's not driven people away because you can go to variants of Android that you eliminate Google and you really isolate yourself. But the problem is you isolate yourself, and being able to do everything that other Android users can do becomes more difficult. You have to sideload so many things, and some stuff will not work, though that's kind of getting addressed. But in the end, it's a tough situation for even an Android user to do this. But let's break this down. So Elon says yes, if he has to, he'll make a phone. Okay. Why would you make such a rash decision based off of a Twitter app? Yeah, I know you on Twitter, but you're going to go dump billions more into something that most likely will fail, especially based on what we've seen. And I don't know, maybe starting up a new business or partnering, and that's some things I'm going to address here, maybe could work. So let's go down these paths. If I were Elon Musk, what would I do knowing what I know? Well, the first thing I would do is I wouldn't worry about it because I have a very functional PWA. So just use my web browser. The web browser delivers a very, very similar experience to the app. You can't really use, the thing about an app versus a web app is that the app can function not connected, whereas the web app needs to be connected to the host server. What do you do on Twitter not connected? Exactly. So just use what you got. Apple says we're taking the app out of the store. Well, so be it. No problem. I'm going to keep operating. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just tell the users this is what you do. Everything will be fine. Google the same way. Google decides to do it. Hey, not a problem. Now, that's one solution. That's the easiest solution, and that's probably the most acceptable solution for everybody. Now, what's another solution? Well, if I was dead set on having an app, then one thing I'm going to have to do is abandon Apple completely. So the iOS users are going to have to get abandoned because side loading apps, this is just not going to happen in that realm of the market. You'd have to tell those users, go to an Android device. Because on Android, even if Google removes from the Play Store, as many of you know, you can sideload. It's easy to sideload apps. And we could take this a step further. Google could host the app, and when you connect, now the app would need to be given permissions, but the app could have a download function, which downloads and then kicks off an install and installs an update. And then you're back up and going. It's a one-time permission thing, and then after the permissions are all granted, every time it happens, it happens. Now, whenever you grant something like that, you open up yourself to some security issues. And it's not necessarily advisable to tell people to sideload, and that would be a sideloading situation as well. Unless you made a store and, so you have a Twitter store and you can get things from the Twitter store, but you're not getting them from the Play Store. So anytime you go outside of these realms, you have to start worrying about security. And if you set up to where you just downloaded from twitter.com the app and installed it, you set up the potential of someone being able to hack someone else's device by doing some impersonations. Might not be easy, but still it's something that you open yourself up to. But that's a solution right there. Just sideload. Use any Android device that you want to. Most of the iPhone users, I'd suggest that you jump on a Samsung device. Would be your best bet. And you're actually going to get better hardware overall, but you'd want to go with Samsung. There are other devices, and this takes us to some other things that Elon could do. So Elon could recommend a device and a distribution of Android that is Googleless. Now, unfortunately, we don't really have those right now. There's variants of things out there, but we just don't quite have what we used to have, say, 5-10 years ago. It's kind of sad, but I personally don't worry about it too much anymore. But that is an option. So if people don't want to be, they're concerned, let's say, about the Google getting into your information. Now, the problem when you do this is you do enter into that realm of how do I get these other apps onto my devices? You can still put Android apps on, but side loading becomes your thing. APK Pure has an app that will help do this for you. That's an example. And you could use them kind of as a store, and they grab the latest APKs and put them up there. I don't know what APKs might be missing, but that's a solution. All right, let's carry this a little bit further. So Elon is dead set on having a phone, because I can see this happening. I can see if Apple pulled the app from the store, he would immediately get this I'm going to take Apple down mentality. That's the way people of his psyche think. So it's going to be the immediate response is I'm going to take them down. Hey, I can understand it. It might be my response if I were in his shoes. And Google may be the same way. Though Google's less of an entity as far as hardware is concerned, they're huge entity as far as operating system for mobile devices is concerned. But okay, we're going to do that. Now, what are your options? There are many options here in this space. The one that he says, make a phone, I don't know whether to start there. And let's start there. That's the most difficult thing. That's the most costly thing. I don't know how you go about that, Elon. I've got some ideas what I would do with my money. I think I would at least initially start with going to somebody like HTC and get devices built. You could go to one of the makers in China and work out a deal with one of them, Huawei or Xiaomi. You could go to one of them and have a device made. That's one way to do it. You can't just start up with nothing and start designing and building. You got a lot of hiring you're going to have to do of engineering teams and who's going to do your fabrication. You're just, that's a huge, huge, huge investment. Quite similar in scale to building an automotive plant. Maybe not quite as costly in some regard, but some of that stuff's still pretty expensive. That assembly machinery, and then what are you going to do? Are you going to do surface board building? If you're going to do all that, you got to get those soldering machines and assembly machines, and oh my gosh, it's you're just opening up a huge, huge bucket of issues, shall we say? So to me, that's maybe the smartest thing would be to go to HTC and work out a deal with HTC. And now what OS are you going to put on it? Now, herein lies the question. If you want people to be able to use their devices, which they're going to want to be able to use more than Twitter, you can't put some foreign OS on there that doesn't support Android. Now, kind of get into this area of, do you start with one thing and then evolve to another? And I think what I would do if it were me is I would start with Android. My first release devices would be Android. I'd do my own fork of Android. I would make it Googleless and then work out the Play Store of how to get APKs onto devices, work something out there. Building your own stores, probably not a smart move. Maybe you start out with APK Pure or something like that. I don't know. I would put a few people on it and work it out. I haven't thought that one out with a lot of in-depth thought, but you got to address that issue because people are going to have to message. They're going to have to play games. They're going to have to use applications to do things like some people need Microsoft Office on their mobile device. So that's probably the best thing to do. And then with that, getting your first devices out, we're still probably looking at 2 years. Get your first devices out and then be working on your own OS that could also run Android apps. So that's a distinct possibility. Have your own OS, CPUs, emulation, etc. CPUs and memory and all is getting better and less expensive. So emulation can certainly be a real thing. So that's one way to address this, that Elon could address it. Another way, so that's making your own device. And another way would just be to go grab a device that's being made, already manufactured, and get your own version of it, like an S23. Go to Samsung and buy an S23, S23 Ultra, S23 Plus. Buy rights to that device unbranded or branded with your name on it, but with some kind of base Android unbranded OS. Again, another fork, and kind of work from there and work with Samsung to get that leveraged on. But you're working with a big tech company. I'm not sure how Samsung would work with that. I know they have done similar things. You may be back over in the China boat again, getting with one of those makers. Certainly ways to achieve this, but building a device from scratch just doesn't make sense. And none of it makes sense. I wouldn't let myself get into this position. I'm a libertarian. I believe in free speech, but I do not believe that I would allow on any platform I operated extreme hate speech and extremism and those kinds of things. I would disallow it, that's his problem. He doesn't want to right now. So he's facing a bigger problem than just Apple and Google pulling the app out of the Play Store. He's also facing a backlash of advertisers, which is what causes Twitter to run. So without them, there's going to be more subscription that's going to have to come up. And I don't know if I want to pay for Twitter. And I don't know how many other people want to pay for Twitter. There's other options that will come to be. So anyway, that's my response to Elon's comment on building a phone. I just don't see it. If you want to go do it, I'm sure Elon's not watched this, but if he wants to go do it, more power to him. If he can build a good, solid device, he's going to have to build a device that people would want to use. Everything that I've just described, why would you make that change? Why would I make that change? Why would most people make that change? They're not. People would just as soon lose Twitter than to make a change to the device that they're using. So there's no incentive, but Starlink, now that's an incentive, but you're going to need more of the satellites up. And can you transmit from a device that is, okay, I'm going to hold up my Surface Duo, which is a very thin device, but, I'll hold up my Samsung S21 Ultra. Am I going to be able to transmit from a device like that up to Starlink? That's what you should work on. And if you can get something like that, now you're giving people an incentive to make a change. You still got a big hurdle, people have got these things and they're going to need to be able to connect with them. Now, mine would be able to connect to some degree. It's Bluetooth. Your Apple Watches, but even this watch, I have an app that helps me do lots of things with this particular watch. I would need that on whatever device you come out with. So big hurdles. I got a lot of ideas on it, but I'd like to hear what you think. This was a long video, but I wanted to do this and see what other people thought. And hey, if you found this content useful, give it a like, share it. And if you find content here to be useful enough, consider subscribing. And most of all, thanks for watching.